Now, it's always important to differentiate between traumatic fear and rational present-day fear. Traumatic fear is, of course, completely rational, but it is rational in the language of the body, in the language of dissociation. And as an uneducated public, we do not understand the rationale of trauma. But fears that are being triggered by past events that have not been dealt with and that are being viewed through a young age, like the age of a 2-year-old. That's what happens when we have unresolved trauma. Well, to a 2-year-old, every little thing is a huge ordeal. And so when we confuse those things and respond to a small problem in present day as a 2-year-old dealing with a giant problem, we overreact. We thus don't attune accurately with the present, and as a result, we often we can make the present problem worse by not responding to it accurately. And so that's the first distinction. But let's look at rational fears in the present. All fear correlates to pain. So it is intelligent to be afraid of probabilities that have high levels of pain. And it is unintelligent to fear unlikely events that have little or no pain associated with them, particularly in the present day. So how do we differentiate between these two categories of fear? So if we can look at something and say, for example, I have no money, I need to pay rent, I have $30, I need to have $1,300, we're off. It's going to be really painful to be evicted. It's going to be painful. It's a big deal. So then we can take a list of possible responses to move ahead of time, to find another place, to borrow money, to get a job, to negotiate a payment plan. There can be a list of different things that we can do. And the intelligent person takes the least amount of energy to have the most amount of impact at reducing pain and increasing well-being. So this is a strategic response to present-day fear. Now, one way to process this, because part of the problem with most of us having unresolved trauma from the past is that we lump all these fears together into something that can be paralyzing or triggering. Paralyzing, it's too big to deal with. Triggering, I fly off the handle over a tiny thing because I'm relating the tiny thing to everything. I'm globalizing everything. It's this one thing, but I'm not relating to it as one thing. Once it gets too close to us, it feels like the one thing is everything. My entire life is ruined because I have one of my 4 tires is flat. And if this globalizing tends to happen when 3 or 4 things in a row tend to occur, and we just say it's never going to work out. That's a globalization. So you cannot solve a globalized fear. The whole world is out to get me. Well, you're screwed. However, this one person is gossiping about me in this one area that's faulty, meaning the gossip about me in here, so-so, the gossip here, but here it's really off, and it's this one person, or it's these 3 people, or whatever it is, or it's in this one chat room, or whatever. So these are things that one can parse out and make responses to. The instinctive reptilian responses of fight, flight, and free. I can run away from certain spaces that I'm not ready or able to deal with. I can assert control in areas where I have authority and control. But we're dealing with processing. So to process a fear, it has to be something that's going on right now. To process trauma, you have to regress and go back to the age of the trauma. But to process a fear, it has to be going on right now, and you have to isolate it as a specific thing. Now, if it's in a pattern, it can be important to deal with the pattern. If most of my friends gossip about me, there's a pattern. And so if what does that mean? Well, it could mean that I don't like myself very much, and the only people who resonate with that are people who don't like me very much. So when I put off a vibe of not liking myself, the people who like me don't like that vibe, and so they keep their distance. They have a high opinion of me, but they keep their distance. And the people who do not like me very much, they connect because we're simpatico. I don't like myself, you don't like me. So these are all my friends. So naturally, they're going to gossip about things that they don't like. And so to change that pattern, I may need to like myself enough to pick people and friends that like me. So you can look at things as a pattern. But generally, to respond to a specific fear, you want to break it down into detail. The next thing that you want to do is make a list of, understand what the fear is. What is the pain associated with that? Is it the pain of humiliation, of shame, of dissociation, of shock? What is the pain? And on what levels will it may have impact? Sometimes something has multiple impacts. In a shame-based culture, for example, that shames disability by ennobling ability. Well, if you get into this accident, you could be shamed as being a failure. That's an emotional or social shame. You could not be able to work as much. That's a financial pain. And then you've got physical pain on top of that. And if you beat yourself up and attack yourself for making mistakes, then you're going to blame and beat yourself up for being physically injured. So you've got 4 dimensions of pain if you get injured. Well, if you are set up in that kind of a hostile environment, what efforts can you make to prevent an injury, minimize the degree of the injury, rapidly repair from the injury? And so this is kind of a logistical response to fear. I'm afraid of this. There's a reasonable chance it may happen. There's a high degree of pain. And so I'm going to invest time doing these things that will make it less likely to happen. Now, paralysis and avoidance is not a response. So you want specific actions to be able to be taken, which means it has to be in your control to some degree. You need data and you need some control. Now, it's usually a good idea to let go of fears that you have no way to respond to because you have no control about them. There's some things you have some control over. I mean, you can fly to another country, perhaps within 24 hours, and then certain things happening in this country are not happening over there, but you probably have to return in 30 days or whatever, and sort out what's going on in this country if you don't have a lifetime visa and can't be mobile. So it is important to be clear on what you can and cannot change. To give yourself some breathing room, it can be useful to acknowledge that you do have some control of everything in this life. And one of the reasons for that is you have control of whether or not you commit suicide. You can kill yourself at any given point in the journey. And so there's some power. So there's some choice. And you can also generally move about to some degree, so that there's usually some influence. And you want to brainstorm all the different things that you could do, the benefits of doing them and the costs of doing them. And you want to pick things that have high benefits and low cost. high upside and low downside. Those are good choices to make. It's also important to understand your goals. If not looking bad to Susie Q is your number one goal, it's less helpful when Susie Q is an idiot who you happen to be in a jealous tiff with, but has nothing to do with happiness or well-being. Now, the process of writing is really important because you've got to get outside, you've got to get bigger than the situation, which means you can't be in it. So you have to write it down and then look at it as an intelligent observer. And so here you can pick the things that you can do to improve things. And rather than fear, rather than dwell, take immediate action and get those things done in the order that is important and urgent, and then after important and urgent, not urgent, but still important. Take action on these things, and fear can, in this situation, be your teacher. Now, the other thing is the fear of being. This is fears around being rejected, traumatized, unloved, alone, overwhelmed. So these are fears of being, and they often stem from early childhood dynamics. Now, the fear of being usually lead to this sense of the world feeling very big, like there's this giant world out there, and it's too much to face. I can't think, I can't look, it's too big for me. Now, this speaks to trauma and being in a regressed state. Now, in order to deal with a regressed state, you've got to be a loving parent. Now, this is very difficult to do, of course, if your parents were not loving and they taught you how to hate yourself, and now you hate your little girl or your little boy, the one that's feeling these things. Now, in this scenario, I recommend that you expose yourself to an adult. Now, there are plenty of grown-ups around in our culture because we raise them to hate themselves, to hate innocence, to hate helplessness, to hate the states of infancy and dependency that are innate and biological, meaning it's crazy because every single human being on the planet has been a helpless infant at one time. And if they do not survive that period of dependency by being nourished by someone competent enough to keep them alive, they're dead. But because we don't train grown-ups to be adults, because we don't train parents to be effective parents, grown-ups generally do a sloppy job, particularly in internal dynamics. They may give you enough food, that's relatively common in the West, enough shelter, enough clothing, but not enough dignity, not enough self-awareness, not enough emotional literacy, not enough sense of value and care and attention to detail. And of course, for an infant, where every little small thing is a giant thing, because they're so small, the world is so big, so small things in the world feel so big. These are big deals. Now, you need to be a friend to yourself in this terrain. And if you don't know how to do that, watch some videos on loving the inner child. Find an adult somewhere on YouTube who knows how to be an adult. And the definition of an adult is the one who competently loves their reality, beginning with themselves and going out. Because love is a scientific, it's a definition of competency. You cannot love someone and be a fucking moron. You've got to understand what love is and who the other person is and what they need. You have to be intelligent in order to love. And it is intelligent to be in a nurturing, reciprocal relationship with reality. It's intelligent to love yourself, meaning intelligence is the efficiency with which energy is transformed into human well-being. If you show care to yourself and others in your reality, well-being goes up. It's intelligent. So the next thing to do in this writing process is, particularly if you're feeling small and vulnerable, is to write a nurturing, friendly letter to your little one. Hey in there, how you doing? Is there a response? If there isn't a response, then that part doesn't feel safe to answer the question with the you that they've gotten to know. So you come back to you. I guess I haven't been treating you very well, and I don't have a very good reputation. It's, the fact that you don't want to talk to me generally means that when you open your mouth, I insult you. I demean you in some way, and I'm sorry for that. That's not your fault. Those are my inadequacies as a parent to you, the internal infant. Those are my inadequacies, and they're not personal to you. They were just handed down to me, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're dealing with this. But you can write a dialogue back and forth, listening and feeling, and you can respond. I'm really hurt and small. I feel completely overwhelmed. Well, what does an adult say when an infant is completely overwhelmed? This is probably a 2-year-old in you, 1-year-old, 6 months, completely overwhelmed. Let me hold you, and I'll be with you. Maybe I'll hum. Maybe I'll hug a pillow. Maybe I will go for a walk and move our bodies together. This will calm a 1 or 2-year-old down. The mother moves and walks, goes for a little walk, etc. Maybe that will create some regulation and calmness. How do you feel now? Well, I can face the world now. I can let go of this overwhelm, and I can go and do this one thing and this one thing. So becoming an encouraging, nurturing dialoguer with the smaller parts in yourself that feel alone and traumatized and scared is a really big part of growing and healing and making positive movement forward.